So my goals for 2022 are to carry each of these goals forward, and see if maybe an extra year helps me accomplish some, if not all. Not going to get overly ambitious, as clearly I did in 2021. Going to pivot a little bit, take a dose of realism, and refocus on these goals, because there are goals that I still want to and aim to achieve. What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today Podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 199 of the Spun Today Podcast. And if you're listening to this episode after the last episode that I published, episode 198, which I recorded while sick with COVID, then that means that I made it, folks. I am alive. I am delivered. And apologies also for the previous episode, which I recorded with none of my equipment, no microphone, no mixer, my Rodecaster Pro, which having a lot of fun, getting to know and learning. But I just did it directly into my portable MP3 player. And I did so in my bedroom, which is not where I normally record podcast episodes. So the ambiance was a little bit different. So just in terms of sound quality, if it wasn't up to par, I apologize. But I did what I could in post-production. But like I mentioned in that episode, me and my entire family had COVID, and we were all quarantining. So it was the only quiet corner I could find. And just a quick update on that, we're all feeling way better. None of us have symptoms anymore, with the exception of a minor cough that just lingers, which they say, or I've heard, that is a tell or a main symptom of the Omicron strain, because I'm not sure which strain we got, but it's likely that it was Omicron, because that's the strain that was prevalent during the time that we tested positive. And they say that cough, a persistent cough, is common with the Omicron strain, which we all had. But besides that, and every once in a while coughing up some gnarly green shit, we feel pretty normal. Just a cough that's slowly going away, or is less persistent, and a little bit of chest pain, which I attribute to just coughing so much, But enough of that. On to more positive news, more positive thoughts, more positive vibes. Welcome to 2022, folks. I hope your beginning of the year was better than mine. And I hope we can all definitely make 2022 better than 2021 was. And with that said, this episode 199 of the Spun Today Podcast, is a 2021 Spun Today Wrap-Up Show. So in this episode, I'm going to recap and reflect on the top 5 Spun Today episodes of 2021, and top 5 in terms of listenership. And I'm also going to share some of my writing and podcasting goals for 2022. This is similar to the 2020 wrap-up show that I did at the end of 2020. So I'm also going to reflect on the goals from 2021 that I anticipated completing. Spoiler alert, many of the goals proved to be a tad too ambitious to get done within a year. And especially the year of 2021, which was a rough one. Just in terms of the pandemic and finding the motivation and the false starts with opening back up and locking back down. Dealing with a second baby, which was very different from our first one, which was a very easy baby. So I definitely didn't anticipate that. I also started a new job in 2021 after being 10 years with one company within the finance space. Moved over to another one, which I hadn't mentioned here on the podcast. That was back in August. And that has proven to be, or to have been, a great move in terms of the space that I'm in, definitely financially, but most importantly, just the environment that I'm in, the folks that are around me. But making that type of transition, takes a toll. Whenever you begin a new endeavor, a new job, especially after being at a place for as long as I was in my previous role, which was for 10 years. Which I know, at the end of the day, Those are all fucking excuses, right? But yeah, what I'm able to do in 2022 in terms of execution of goals that I didn't achieve in 2021 will be, I guess, what ultimately dictates if and what I learned from not achieving certain goals in 2021 that I set out to. But yeah, stick around to find out which 5 episodes you, dear listener, listened to the most last year in 2021. But before we get into it, please take a minute to listen to how you can help support the Spun Today podcast if you so choose. Your listenership means a lot to me. Your continued support means a lot to me. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can help support this show, which I'll detail in the outro. But just know that helping support this show in any way that you can gets me that much closer to being able to free up time to write more and create more content, record more episodes, and ultimately do more of what I love to do. Here is one quick way that you can help support this show. If you want to help support the Spun Today podcast financially, you can do so by going to spuntoday.com/support. Here you'll find a few different ways that you can do so. You can shop on Amazon, but first go to my website, spuntoday.com/support, click on the Amazon banner, which will take you to Amazon's website where you do your shopping like you normally do. It will not cost you anything extra, but I will get credit for driving traffic to their website. Another cool way that you can help support this show is through Patreon, where you can set up reoccurring donations to my podcast, whether it be $1 per show, $2 per show, etc. And depending on how much you choose to pledge, you will receive some Patreon perks in return. Things like free writing pieces, free bookmarks, free digital copies of my books, etc. Again, my Patreon link can be found at spuntoday.com/support. You can also set up similar reoccurring payments via my Ko-fi page. And if you want to send a one-time happiness bomb donation, if you will, you can do so via my PayPal link. Again, all of which can be found at spuntoday.com/support. Alrighty, so like I said at the beginning of the episode, I'm now going to share the top 5 episodes of the Spun Today podcast in 2021, starting with number 5. And as I'm recording this, by the way, I'm realizing that my voice or ability to speak for long stretches of time isn't all the way back, apparently. So apologies for my voice cracking here and there, but it is what it is, right? And what I am going to do also is link to each of the web pages. Like you guys know, for every single episode, I create a dedicated web page for the episode, all of which can be found at spuntoday.com/podcast, and then / for the specific episode number. So the 5th most listened to episode of the year in 2021 was episode 176 of the Spun Today podcast. So that link is specifically spuntoday.com/podcast /176. And I will link to it in the episode notes. The purpose of that is so you can go to it and check out, you can listen to the episode right there within that webpage. Obviously, you can listen in, whatever your favorite podcatcher is, wherever you normally listen to podcasts. But the added benefit that you get from visiting my website and the dedicated podcast page is every single link or reference or whatever it is that I was speaking about during that episode, you'll have all the links and everything within there. You also have it in the episode notes within your podcatcher, but it's, laid out a little bit differently. And sometimes you have some extra content within my website. Like if there's any photos or videos or anything like that, it'll make sense for you guys to go check it out there. So the 5th most listened to episode was episode 176. And episode 176 was, I spoke about the process of having a new podcast logo designed, which, by the way, I tweaked slightly. Since then, I kept the logo completely intact, exactly as it was. And if you listen to the episode, you'll learn that I went through a service called 99 Designs, which I use for my book covers. They also do logo design and a bunch of other art and visual design needs that you may have, all of which I flesh out more during that specific episode. But on the expert advice of PodSpike and a podcast clinic that I had, I think I mentioned this on the episode, I used a background color that'll pop a bit more. They recommended like a salmon type color or a blue, light bluish type color. which is what I'm using. And I also took out the with Tony Ortiz part. The logo was Spun Today with Tony Ortiz. My idea was, like the Joe Rogan Experience or WTF with Mark Maron or the Church of What's Happening Now with Joey Diaz or Skeptic Tank with Ari Shaffir or the Tim Ferriss Show and all these podcasts that I listen to frequently. And they have the host's name, within like the logo and the title. But they highlighted that these people use their names because they're famous. They're famous from like something else. So it helps call attention to their podcast. Me, obviously, I'm not famous. So I took that off and added, again, at their advice, my tagline for the show, which is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. And I think it works really well. But anyway, during episode 176, I spoke about when I initially got my new podcast logo. I also had another segment of goats doing goat shit, which is a new segment that I started in 2021. Whenever a GOAT, acronym meaning greatest of all time, does something dope and noteworthy, at least in my estimation. Which, by the way, a good way for you guys to, if you enjoy the goats doing goat shit segment, because I sprinkle them throughout like different episodes of the podcast. It's not every single episode. So instead of, having to like comb through different episodes to look for that segment, a good way for you guys to listen to just like a compilation of all current and future segments would be to check out my YouTube page. You can go to my YouTube page, just go to YouTube, search for Spun Today with Tony Ortiz or Spun Today Podcast, or by using one of the YouTube links on my website. And it's really cool because you'll get, I chop up all these episodes. So I'll take like each of the like goats doing goat shit segments or like clips, and I'll compile them within a playlist. So you'll get just all of those segments back to back to back to back from all the different episodes that they appear in. And same goes for episode writing tips or movie recaps and reviews. There's a playlist for that. TV shows. It's a playlist for politics, etc., etc., etc. So whatever floats your boat, whatever your poison is, as they say, you can find consolidated there within a playlist on my YouTube page without all the other stuff that you may or may not be into. But yeah, back to episode 176. It was another segment of Goats Doing Goat Shit. And in that one, I spoke about Jay-Z and his LVMH deal with Ace of Spades, as well as Jay-Z's title deal with Jack Dorsey and Square. And I also spoke about UFC 259, which was the card on March 6th when Adesanya went up in weight to fight, I forget how to say his name, Blachowicz. And lastly, I recapped and reviewed watching Coming to America, the sequel of Coming to America. And that was the 5th most watched episode of 2021. The 4th most watched episode of 2021 was episode 178 of the Spun Today Podcast, Notre Ave, the audiobook. Now, this was pretty cool for me to see because it's one of my audiobooks. For those of you that are listeners of the podcast, or frequent listeners rather, and know this, apologies. But for any of you who do not, one of the types of episodes that I put out are audiobooks of the short stories that I've written. And what I do sporadically, like throughout the year, I'll take like an old short story or old audiobook that I've produced in the past, and I'll like re-release it and re-air it. Just because I know not every listener of this show or any show really necessarily digs into the historical archives of shows to re-listen to like all the back catalog. So I do that, and this was one of those episodes. Notre Ave is a short story of mine, which you can read at spuntoday.com/short stories/Notre Ave. Again, the direct link for that you can find on the podcast episode page, linked to in the episode notes here, where you can read the story. You can listen to just the audiobook as well, or listen to the audiobook podcast episode where I break down where the story came from, where I got the idea for the story, and give you some background to it before playing the actual audiobook for it. And just to give you a quick background of Notre Ave, It's a story of police brutality and teenage angst, a story that is unfortunately always seems to be relevant. And I got the idea for the story taking the train to work, to and from work. I was coming home from work one day. I got off on my stop on the A, and there was like a ton of commotion, a lot of noise. I was walking down the stairs. You just hear like screaming and a lot of like ruckus. And it was a young lady that she was like fighting and screaming and stuff like that. And they were like trying, a bunch of cops were there. They were trying to like restrain her. And obviously I don't know what happened before then, if there was like a fight or an incident or what. But she was just like wilding out. I actually recorded some of the audio of the incident because it was just like a lot. And I sprinkled some of that throughout actually the audiobook version of the episode. That like planted a seed of, what did this girl go through that day that led to this moment with the altercation with the cops. And then I showed it from like both perspectives, from the cops' point of view as well. How did his day unfold? And, I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but it's a story. It's one of my favorite stories of mine. And not because I think it's, oh, wow, it's such a great story, but just because it came from, or the idea of it rather came so like serendipitously. And I also remember writing it. And it was one of those stories that you write and you just like start writing it. You don't know exactly where it's gonna end. And I remember having to pause towards the end of it, like not knowing like how to wrap it up. And then I know I gave it a breather. I don't know if it was like days or a couple weeks, but then like the ending came to me again, like very unexpectedly, kind of like a light bulb moment. And because of that as well, it's one of my favorite stories. And that was the fourth most listened to episode of 2021 of the Spun Today Podcast, episode 178. The third most listened to episode of the Spun Today Podcast in 2021 was episode number 171. In this episode, I spoke about watching the movie Soul, the Disney movie, which is dope movie, by the way. I actually been meaning to like rewatch it. And I think if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I think that this episode was the first episode where I started adding the like 30 to like 60 second intro clip in the beginning of the episode before like even like the intro starts. I think I started doing that with this episode. But yeah, I reviewed the Disney movie Soul. I also spoke about watching Cobra Kai, the series, which by the way, the latest season just came out, season 4, dope season. I'm definitely going to recap and review that in a future episode. But this was probably like the first or second season that I was recapping here. And I also spoke about the 4-part Netflix special, Schultz Saves America, which is a great series. If you guys haven't watched it, I still highly, highly recommend it. And of course, if you want to listen to the deep dive that I took for that special or for Cobra Kai or for the movie Soul, feel free to check out episode number 171 of the podcast, or like I mentioned before, my YouTube page, and you'll find Soul within the movie playlist, Cobra Kai within the TV show playlist, and Schultz Saves America within the comedy special playlist. Now for the second runner-up, number 2 most watched episode of 2021 of the Spun Today Podcast. It was episode 179. Episode 179 was a free writing session episode. And for those of you in the know, you know that each of my free writing session episodes, I share my writing stats, meaning how many days out of the month I wrote versus days that I didn't write. In this episode 179, I shared my February and March 2021 writing stats. I also share a writing tip in each and every free writing session episode. These are tips that I get from like other writers or writing blogs, books on writing, etc., podcasts on writing. I also tell you guys about what I've been reading. In this specific episode, I gave a breakdown of Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. And I also shared feedback on a masterclass that I took, which was Walter Mosley's masterclass. So definitely check that out. And lastly, I wrap up each free writing session episode with a writing piece of mine, an older free writing piece that I read, I link to in the episode notes. Then I just like reflect on it, see how I feel about it at this point in time, reflecting back on it, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and kind of do like a mini dissect of my own writing. And the free writing piece that I shared during this episode, 179, was titled A Disappointing Time. That can be found at spuntoday.com/free writing/A Disappointing Time. And again, you can find all those links and more within the webpage for that specific podcast episode at spuntoday.com/podcast/179. And now, folks, for the moment you've all been waiting for. The number one listened to episode of the Spun Today podcast in the entire year of 2021 was episode 177. This was titled Conor McGregor and Joe Rogan in Goats Doing Goat Shit, UFC 260, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. In this episode, I had yet another segment of the Goats Doing Goat Shit that I mentioned earlier, where I featured Conor McGregor as well as Joe Rogan. Conor McGregor was for his sale of his shares of Proper 12 whiskey. Joe Rogan I featured for his now iconic, infamous, famous, viral, I don't know what term to use for it, but situation where he stood up to Carlos Mencia for being a joke thief and did so at his own detriment. He did so standing up for his friends and fellow comics that were getting jokes stolen from them, but were like too scared to say anything because Carlos Mencia was such a like big star at the time. And to his detriment, because he ultimately wound up getting like kicked out of the Comedy Store, lost his management, which was the same management as Carlos Mencia's, and he wasn't the Joe Rogan that he is now, back then. But he did it based on what was right, based on integrity, based on the love of the art form. And that's why I featured him, and that's what I broke down in this segment of Goats Doing Goat Shit. I also spoke about UFC 260, which was the Miocic and Ngannou fight back on Saturday, March 27th. And lastly, I broke down and recapped Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was so much better than the first Justice League. And I told you guys about like all the drama and shit within that, and why there were two of the same movies, essentially, just like different cuts of it. So definitely check that out. And that, folks, were the top 5 most listened to episodes of 2021 of the Spun Today podcast. Thank you very much, each and every one of you, for listening, for rocking out with me, and supporting the show. I really, really appreciate it. Now, before I wrap up the show, let's go to my goals for 2022, as well as reflecting on the goals from 2021 that I may or may not have achieved. Spoiler alert, there's more in the may not have achieved column. So in terms of writing goals for 2021, there were 6 specific writing goals that I wanted to achieve. And I'm going to read them out to you, and they were goals in no particular order. 1 was submit a draft of FRACTAL 2 for editing. FRACTAL 2 is a working title for my still untitled second novel, the continuation to my debut novel, FRACTAL. Goal number 2 was submit FRACTAL 1 for editing, because I am planning to have FRACTAL 2 edited, and I'm going to go back and edit and re-release FRACTAL 1. Because if you guys know, I did not get professional editing for FRACTAL 1. I believe episode 123, 123, I took a deep dive into like how I took FRACTAL from an idea to a published book, and told you guys all about that process. So if you're interested, please feel free to go check that episode out. Writing goal number 3 was start writing FRACTAL Part 3. Writing goal number 4 was publish my first short story anthology. Writing goal number 5 was make Way For You Volume 1 workbook. A workbook to accompany Make Way For You, Volume 1. And writing goal number 6 was to publish Make Way For You, Volume 2. Now, out of the 6 writing goals, those 6 specific writing goals that I set out to achieve in 2021, I achieved 0. But one of them I got pretty close on. So I didn't achieve them for all the aforementioned excuses that I gave you guys in the beginning. So my goals for 2022 are to carry each of these goals forward, and see if maybe an extra year helps me accomplish some, if not all. Not going to get overly ambitious, as clearly I did in 2021. Going to pivot a little bit, take a dose of realism, and refocus on these goals, because they are goals that I still want to and aim to achieve. Now, the one that I got closest on would be actually publishing my first short story anthology. I'm taking the Junot Diaz route of one of his anthologies, Drown, which I really enjoyed. And by taking the Junot Diaz route, I don't know if it was like a conscious decision or not, but there's 8 short stories within that anthology. 8 is my favorite number. And I'll have as many short stories that I would actually want to put in an anthology after I finish the one that I am currently working on, the short story that I'm currently working on, that I thought I was going to finish in 2021 towards the tail end of the year. I finished the first draft. That's the good news. But I still have to, do a couple more pass-throughs through it. And then once that's out the way, all my other short stories are written already. I'm going to pick 7 of the ones that I have written, which you guys can check out some of at spuntoday.com/short stories if you want to check them out in advance. But I'm definitely going to look at those stories with fresh eyes, probably do a rewrite or 2 for each, put them together, and publish my first short story anthology in 2022. So that goal, I feel like I'm so close to that it's probably going to be the first one off the list, checked off that list. Then I definitely have to get cracking and working on FRACTAL 2, because that's just one that I let myself down on that one. Like at writer's block, I have resistance coming in the form of writing this other short story and another short story on top of that. I'm just like getting in my own way when it comes to that story, and I know it, and it sucks. So I definitely have to refocus on that and not allow like anything else to get in the way. Once I get the short story out the way and that anthology published, it's going to be like all hands on deck in terms of like focus and attention on FRACTAL 2. Then once that's done and I submit it for editing, it's going to be kind of like a 2-for-1 there, because FRACTAL 1 obviously is already a published book, but I'm going to have that professionally edited before releasing FRACTAL 2. And only then will I start writing FRACTAL 3, obviously. And the other goal that I had in 2021, which I kind of scratched off, was Make Way for You Volume 2. Make Way for You was always intended, it's published as Volume 1 because they always intended to have additional volumes on top of it, because it is a compilation of free writing posts of mine, of which I have plenty and I do often. Less so lately, to be honest, but still often enough. But it's more a matter of finding a through line that kind of goes together. Like Make Way for You Volume 1 was pretty much every single post is me unconsciously or consciously, however you want to look at it, speaking to myself and trying to give myself advice and motivate myself and inspire myself. Like I noticed that through line through those like 70 something different writing pieces that are found within Make Way for You, which is a collection of tips for getting out of your own way, because that's what they did for me. And I've thought of just like, reading back on different writing pieces, I've thought of, or I haven't found that next through line. I don't know if it's going to be like a part 2 of, tips for getting out of your own way, like more of the same, or like a different type of theme and through line, if I can make that connection. So we'll see. So that one's much more on the back burner. I did want to, and I started, I got, I would say 35 to 40% done years ago, and I just dropped it. Something I never went back to was Make Way for You Volume 1 in Espanol. I was like doing the translating myself. I translated, again, probably like 35, 40% maybe. Probably more like 30, 35%, if I remember correctly, translated into Spanish. And I want to put that out in Spanish. So I think that is going to take priority over the Make Way for You Volume 2, just to put out the Spanish version of Volume 1. Just because, again, that's something that I dropped, I regret dropping, and never went back to. And it's a bunch of the work is already done, 30, 40% of it is already done. And those folks are my writing goals for 2022. And now lastly, I'll leave you guys with this. My podcasting goals for 2021. I had 3 distinct podcasting goals. Number 1 was to double my listenership by year end. So by the end of the year, I wanted to double the amount of listeners that I got. Goal number 2 was just more creative posts and clips on Instagram, Twitter, etc. And just to get like more organized with that. And goal number 3 was to increase the output of shows from bi-weekly to weekly. So let's start there. Clearly, my show is still bi-weekly. It's not feasible for me to produce the show weekly. Again, your continued and increased support will definitely help facilitate that and my ability to do so, but currently it's not the case. I did, however, increase the number of interviews that I did for the year. In 2021, I interviewed a few more people, which I definitely enjoyed doing and plan to do more of in 2022. So there's definitely that. Regarding the more creative posts and clips and stuff on IG, Twitter, etc., I've quote unquote achieved that. It's not something that you just like do it once and that's it. It's something you have to stay consistent with. But I've definitely been much more structured with my posting. I have a social media posting calendar, and I have like my food for thought Monday quotes that I post every Monday on IG, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest now as well. My Writing Wednesday, Wordy Wednesday rather, Word of the Week, which I post on Wednesday on each of those platforms. My Free Write Friday posts, which I really like. I post those on Fridays, which are like excerpts from Make Way for You Volume 1, by the way. And just other free writing session pieces of mine that you can find at spuntoday.com/freewriting. I put them out in these cool little like scrollable templates. And like I mentioned, the goats doing goat shit posts and templates. And that's my way of being like more creative with like types of posts and stuff like that. So I definitely say that was something that was achieved and that I'm going to continue to do more of in 2022. And lastly, my goal of doubling my listenership within 1 year did not happen. However, I definitely did increase listenership. Thank you. But it wasn't the doubling or aka 100% increase that I was very ambitiously shooting for. It was more of a 20% increase in listenership, which is nothing to sneeze at. I'll definitely take it. And I will carry forward as a goal in 2022 to beat that 20% increase in listenership, check myself with the 100% increase in listenership, and I'm going to aim for a 50% increase in listenership for 2022. Now, that's going to take a lot of you folks listening right now to share my episodes with your friends and family, share them on social media, check out my clips on YouTube that are very easily shareable and more digestible than a full podcast episode. If you know somebody that is into writing or something creative, this is definitely the type of show that they may be interested in, especially the free writing session episodes. I know a lot of writers that I've spoken with, some of which have been here and appeared here on the podcast as Spun Today alumni, have told me they appreciate the writing related content. And if you're a longtime listener of the show, you know what it is. You know what the vibes are. There's a little something for everybody, whether it's movies, stand-up comedy, TV shows, UFC, politics, current events, most of the above seen through the lens and perspective of a writer, but ultimately just someone's honest take of what they were feeling at the time. Either way, folks, I appreciate each and every one of you that take the time to listen to this show. It definitely does mean a lot. And I hope that you stick around to listen to a few different ways that you can help support the show. If you so choose, doing so, again, helps me free up time to create more shows, create more content, think about creative different ways to make clips and segments of the show, to write more, to publish more, which is definitely a major goal and through line of this entire journey of mine. Some ways of support are financial, but there's a bunch of other ways that aren't. Just like following me on social media at Spun Today, sharing podcast episodes, rating and reviewing them, signing up to my free newsletter, etc., etc., etc. So again, folks, that was episode 199 of the Spun Today podcast, the 2021 Spun Today Wrap-Up Show. I can't believe the next episode is episode 200 already. That's insane. But yeah, this was episode 199. Please stay tuned and listen to a few ways you can help support the Spun Today podcast if you so choose. Peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying this podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few quick ways you can help support this show. You can support the Spun Today podcast by going to spuntoday.com/support. There, you'll find my merch section, where you can cop the iconic Podcasts vs. Anybody t-shirt in a wide variety of different colors and all different sizes. Also, if you're into cycling, you can cop the super soft, comfortable, minimalist design Spun Today Bike Club t-shirt. Also available in a bunch of different colors in all different sizes. There are a few other designs of different types of t-shirts. Definitely go there and check it out. spuntoday.com/support. It's the merch section, where you can also get a dope coffee mug. I have coffee mugs with the brand new redesigned Spun Today logo on one side and the tagline that I end every show with on the other, which is start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. The mug is available in both black and white, because we don't discriminate here at the Spun Today podcast. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support and check out the merch section. You can support the Spun Today podcast by checking out my writing. You can go to spuntoday.com/free writing and check out some of my free association writing, which is intended to be some cathartic free writing, but oftentimes doubles down as motivation for myself and others. At spuntoday.com/short stories, you can read a bunch of the different short stories that I've written and actually listen to the audiobook versions of those short stories there as well. Another way you can help support my writing is by going to spuntoday.com/books and checking out what I have in store for sale. Digital copies are available in all formats, whether it be Kindle, iBooks, or a different type of e-reader. You can also purchase paperback copies, if that's your preferred reading method. Currently available, I have my nonfiction, Make Way for You, which is a collection of freely written thoughts that were curated and put together as tips for getting out of your own way. Also available is my debut time travel novel, titled FRACTAL. Again, go to spuntoday.com/books to show your support. Support the Spun Today podcast by following me on social, at Spun Today on Twitter, at Spun Today on Instagram. Please also check out and like my Facebook page, facebook.com/Spun Today, and subscribe to my YouTube page as well. On my YouTube page, not only will you get these full-length episodes, but you'll also get to check out some chopped up clips and bonus content. To get to my YouTube page, just search Spun Today on YouTube or click on any of the YouTube icons on the footer of my website. Also, don't forget to rate and review this podcast wherever it is that you're listening. It really does help. The Spun Today Newsletter is available to each and every one of my listeners absolutely for free. All you have to do is go to spuntoday.com/subscribe and drop in your email address. What I'm going to do is brighten up everybody's least favorite day of the week by delivering 5 curated things within my weekly newsletter every Monday at noon. You're going to receive a photo of the week, a recommended podcast of the week. I listen to tons of podcasts from an array of varied interests. I cherry pick the very best ones so that you can check them out. I also share a video of the week, which can be anything from a tasty recipe to a dope rap battle to an enlightening TED Talk. I also share a quote of the week. And finally, for my fellow wordsmiths out there, a word of the week, so that you can step up your vocab. Again, this curated list is yours absolutely free by going to spuntoday.com/subscribe and dropping in your email address, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Again, go to spuntoday.com/subscribe, drop in your email address, and you'll get the very next one. If you want to help support the Spun Today podcast financially, you can do so by going to spuntoday.com/support. Here you'll find a few different ways that you can do so. You can shop on Amazon, but first go to my website, spuntoday.com/support, click on the Amazon banner, which will take you to Amazon's website where you do your shopping like you normally do. It will not cost you anything extra, but I will get credit for driving traffic to their website. Another cool way that you can help support this show is through Patreon. where you can set up reoccurring donations to my podcast, whether it be $1 per show, $2 per show, etc. And depending on how much you choose to pledge, you will receive some Patreon perks in return. Things like free writing pieces, free bookmarks, free digital copies of my books, etc. Again, my Patreon link can be found at spuntoday.com/support. You can also set up similar reoccurring payments via my Ko-fi page. And if you want to send a one-time happiness bomb donation, if you will, you can do so via my PayPal link. Again, all of which can be found at spuntoday.com/support. If you're a fellow creative, a cool way that you can help support the Spun Today podcast and actually be part of the podcast is by filling out my 5-question questionnaire located at spuntoday.com/questionnaire. Here you'll find 5 open questions related to your craft, your art, what inspires you to create, what type of unrelated hobbies you're into, and what motivates you to get your work done. You can choose to remain anonymous or plug your website and your work. And once you submit your questionnaire, I read your responses on a future episode of the Spun Today podcast. It's completely free at no cost to you. And what I like to say about it is that if your responses could potentially spark inspiration in someone else, why not share that? spuntoday.com/questionnaire. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.